Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining us today, talk about a big fish. This guy actually works for the NFL team. We're going straight to the source here. He's Drew Dougherty. You can find him on Twitter at Dougherty Drew. That's DOUGHERTY Drew. He's the host of Texans TV and team general all-around kind of team media guy and insider there for the Houston Texans, writes for the website, contributor to Texans Radio, et cetera, et cetera. One of our great follows on Twitter for Texans content. Drew, how are you doing, brother? I'm
good. It took all of my restraint when you were, doing my last name letter by letter to not go DOUG. So, well done.
Okay, great, man.
My hands down, but I'm good, man. I'm not as cold as you are. We're obviously closer to the Gulf in Houston. You're in the hill country of Texas, so you get a little bit more of the cold stuff than we do. So we're okay. But you got a fire going over there, or what?
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely, man. Inside and outside, fires going. But yeah, dude, it's been an interesting couple of years, man, with these cold snaps here in Texas. People don't realize that we're not made for it down here.
No,
we don't have you get a flake of snow, everything shuts down. It's just people just don't get it. It was wild having to, coming home from the Senior Bowl just a couple of weeks ago. We got that cold snap that everybody thought was going to be maybe a little bit like last year. It didn't turn out to be quite like it, but everybody there was like, I need to get on a plane home early on Wednesday instead of coming home Thursday. They're like, why? I'm like, because it's going to snow in Texas. They're like, who cares? It snows all the time. I'm like, no, dude, in Texas, they shut down everything.
It's not made for it. Yeah.
I will be stuck here all weekend. All right. And I don't want to keep you stuck here all day. So let's talk about the Texans. The first thing that kind of pops into my mind when I think about it, I know it's not really fantasy related, but I got to know about Laremy Tunsil. There's all this talk about how Laremy Tunsil might be on the trade block, and apparently there's some money that can get opened up if this happens. My question is, and it probably relates to a question about maybe can you just talk about the offensive line, Laremy Tunsil, how that relates to Davis Mills? Is Dave? I mean, to give him a fair shot, is it really fair to kind of trade away your best offensive tackle coming into a year where he could be getting maybe looked at and getting evaluated as a guy that could be a piece moving forward as, a leader and a quarterback for that team? Is that how Houston's kind of sees? I know this is tough. It's kind of asking two questions, but when I think of Tunsil, the first thing I think about is the quarterback and what it might mean to him.
Laremy Tunsil is an excellent left tackle. I think one of the 3 or 4 best in the game. He was gone for the season after week 5. Initially, there was thought to be an injury that would maybe take a month, but it just wound up going the whole year. In his place, Titus Howard eventually slid into that spot, and Titus played really, really well. You got to remember, he was the first round. He's the last first-round pick that this team has, and he was brought in 2019. A bit of a surprise on draft night. A lot of folks thought the Texans might go with a guy like Andre Dillard.
Well, they got sniped. They got sniped by the Eagles, right?
I don't think they did. If you go back and you watch the tape of the war room, so to speak, from that night, when that pick was made by Philadelphia, there was a lot of fist pumping. I guess the Texans were able to get their guy. They were worried that Philly was moving up. They liked Titus Howard, and it was interesting this week. The assistant coaches, a lot of the new ones and some of the old ones spoke with the media. And George Warhop has been with Jacksonville the last 3 seasons, so he was there in 19. And he was asked about Howard, and Warhop said, he's one of 2 guys that I worked out when I was in Jacksonville, and I really liked him. And we really wanted a chance to go for him, to take him, but the Texans took him. The other guy was the guy that we went with, Jawan Taylor. That's who wound up going to the Jaguars. So Warhop from afar had a pretty favorable impression of Howard, and now he's going to get to definitely work with him in some form or fashion wherever he's playing on the line. I kind of think it's going to be left tackle, but to get to your original point, Laremy Tunsil is an excellent player. And really, I think the idea now is with a new offense, because there will be a new offense. Pep Hamilton is the new coordinator. He's in charge of things. And you're not going to see what you've seen the last 5, 6, 7 seasons here in Houston, where the team breaks the huddle, comes to the line, and spends a lot of time checking and getting. I think there's going to be more of a forcefulness and more of a direction there, and you're going to put your offensive line in a better position. I work for the team, so obviously I'm biased, but I refuse to believe that all these guys that have played on the offensive line for the last 5 or 6 seasons are awful. I just refuse to believe that. I don't think that offense and that system put them in an advantageous spot to run the ball. And I think that's going to change now. And it's going to be fascinating to see what Warhop and what Pep Hamilton are able to do to get those guys working together, to get that rush average up. Because think about it. They were dead last in the NFL last year at 3.4 yards per carry. I don't know how you're able to win 4 games, much less 1, when that's all you're doing on the ground. So Warhop was saying, we've got to work as a unit. The offensive line's got to work in union with the back and the receivers and all that. And, he's aiming for 4.5, 4.6 yards a carry, which is a big ask. But the last 3 seasons in Jacksonville, he's gone 4.5, 4.5, and 4.4 in 2019. So if the Texans can get 1 yard better per carry on the ground, wondrous things could happen.
Well, I wonder if they're going to be able to do that with a 32-year-old. I mean, Rex Burkhead's going to be 32. So with David Johnson scheduled to hit unrestricted free agency, with Royce Freeman scheduled to hit unrestricted free agency, I mean, I think Rex Burkhead, is he the only – they got to have some other running backs on the roster that could have – or guys maybe that – I mean, is Scottie Phillips still knocking around there?
And he's a really interesting one because he had the best training camp and best preseason last year out of all the backs. I mean, he really was impressive when he actually got into those August games. He's still on the roster along with Rex. I imagine they're going to sign a free agent or 2. And I would not be surprised if they draft a guy. I feel like I said this every single year the last 4 or 5 years, and it hasn't happened. But I do think – because they have 9 picks as of right now, and they've got 4 in the top 80. But I do think because of that draft capital, I'd be kind of surprised if they don't spend one of those picks on a running back. And I think there's lots of pretty intriguing running backs out there all across the spectrum from the top part of the draft down to the bottom. So, yeah, it's Scottie Phillips and it's Rex Burkhead, who signed a late, in December, he signed a deal to stick with the team. But
he looked good. I mean, he looked good down the stretch. Yeah. You wonder, you wonder if he can keep it up. And you also, when you look at it, you say, okay, what's this offense in general going to look like? I know I kind of wanted you to talk, like, what about Davis Mills? Is this the year where we see, because he kind of looked kind of good last year, I know that, clearly he's a rookie, and I mean, they're going to have warts. Some of the rookies that were drafted a lot higher than him and what was considered a really good quarterback class, they showed off a lot of warts. Davis Mills was kind of a surprise that he was pretty good. I mean, at least as an outsider, that's how I saw it. Is that how people around there saw it? And then is this an evaluation year for Davis Mills, or could this be a year where one of those top 80 picks if a quarterback falls, maybe the Texans could be interested? Like, how do you see the quarterback position coming in to now? We're coming into the combine. We're getting into the heart of the draft season and kind of the offseason plans.
Yeah, I mean, you never know for sure who a team's going to take, and if they do like a guy, are they taking him just because he's the best player available? But there's definitely optimism there with what you saw from Davis Mills. He started and played a lot of games before getting sat down in the middle part of the season. And then when he returned in that second half of the season, he showed some flashes and showed some really impressive traits. And I think there's a definite optimism there. Lovie Smith talked about it. Pep Hamilton, the offensive coordinator, talked about some of the things they're working on with Davis. He's enthused about the new offense. He worked, you got to remember, with Hamilton very, very closely last year. Hamilton was the quarterback's coach, and now he's been elevated to OC. They've started installing that offense. There's going to be a concerted effort to get the ball into the hands of the playmakers in a way that plays up to their strengths. It's not going to be, squaring the square peg into a circular hole. It's going to be, let's make this offense work around the guys and what they do best. So I do think with another year in the system, just another year in the NFL, you're going to see Davis Mills take steps. One thing that you will never, ever, ever have to worry about with Davis Mills is confidence and unflappability. Just as an example, I asked him once, what would you be doing if you weren't a pro football player? And without hesitating, very calmly said, I'd probably be a pro baseball player. I mean, this guy does not lack anything when it comes to confidence, and it's really refreshing, because he had some struggles last year, and it doesn't really look like it brought him down or really shook him, because when he came back, he was pretty effective in moving the offense. And to harken back to what I was saying earlier, this was an offense that could not run the football very well, and this was an offense, I think, that did not put its players in the best position to do what they could do best.
Well, I want to put a pin in that, because you talked earlier about getting the ball in the hands of the playmakers, and that's how you kind of finished it. And I need to get back to that because this is a fantasy podcast. But sure. Just for my own, I just have a couple of questions for my own just NFL fandom that clearly you're in a great position of insight to know. Just the first one is, and this is a completely left turn. Did you like Coach Culley? Was he liked around there? Were you surprised that he was fired?
Everybody loved Coach Culley. I mean, he's one of the greatest guys you'll ever want to know. I mean, it was a pleasure knowing him and working with him. I really enjoyed it. I wish him the best. And it's nothing's ever a surprise in the NFL. I think I've been around here since 2009. There's people that have been around here since before the team was even playing games. When Bob McNair bought the team in October of '99, he started hiring people shortly thereafter. So it nothing's ever really a surprise. But no, everybody that I know loved David Culley, and I'm part of that crew too.
Were you surprised that it was Lovey and no. How? No, not at all. You weren't buying into any of this. What was it? Josh McCown stuff.
Once the decision was made, it wasn't a surprise at all. But yeah, when you heard the names that were being interviewed, sure, a little bit. But I go back to last August, and one of the things I do for the team, I'm the preseason TV sideline reporter. So for the 3 games that were on last year, I'm on the sidelines, and I interview the head coach right before the half, and I set things up, and I interview a player or two during the game. And so the night before those preseason games, we have the production meetings, and they bring in the head coach and they bring in a few players each time. Well, before the Texans played the Cowboys up in Dallas, they brought in those guys, and they also brought in Lovie Smith. And just being up close and listening to Lovie talk, it's like, yeah, that's pretty clear. That guy's a head coach. That makes sense. I mean, he's definitely got a way to deliver his message. He's definitely confident. He's got the respect of everybody in that locker room, not just the defensive players, but the offensive guys, the specialists, the other coaches, the staff. I mean, it's not a surprise at all if you've spent any time around him. And, I think one thing working in his favor is, A, his experience as a head coach. He's done it over a decade. B, he's done it in 2 different spots. But then C, being here in the building for a year, I think is very, very advantageous to him, because when you bring in a new coaching staff, there's a lot of moving parts to that. And I think when you bring in a guy like this, who's A, done the job before, and B, been here in the building, there are less moving parts. So it really, if you look at it in a vacuum, it makes all the sense in the world that the Texans would go with him. And also, not many people remember this, but after Gary Kubiak was fired in 2013, one of the first names that came out as a possibility and as a guy that the Texans wanted to interview and talk with was Lovie Smith's. He was in between Chicago and Tampa Bay that year, and he wound up getting hired by the Buccaneers. But he's always been on the radar of the McNair family, and he finally got to be the guy this year.
And whenever you look at the Texans too, it was one of these things where the defense towards the end of the year was getting better despite losing some guys. I mean, the trade deadline. I thought it was wild that Charles Omenihu was a guy who clearly looked like he was probably a hit considering what the 49ers were willing to do to get him. But even despite some of the players getting injured and some of the other stuff, you could tell the defense was playing hard. So I could totally get it that the team likes him. He seems like the kind of coach that the team seemed to like playing for, at least down the stretch last season.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. They were playing hard. They're actually playing better after the bye week when the self-scouting went down. Now, he'll tell you it wasn't good enough. They got to play a lot better, and they've got to do some things and shore up some things in pass coverage and all that stuff. But one of the things that they did so much better than they did in 2020 was taking the ball away. They only got 9 takeaways in 2020. That was the worst in the NFL, and they jumped up to 25 last year. And that wasn't enough in their eyes, but that was a top 10 mark in the NFL. But yeah, they can still get better, and you saw some signs of improvement. But on the whole, they weren't able to get the job done. That's what happens when you lose 13 games. You can't really say that anything was really rosy. And I'm not breaking any news there, but they can get better. But they were on an upward tick there, and I think maybe another year in the system with some players added through the draft, free agency, that improvement can kind of keep on going. I think
Drew, they're gonna have to add some players in the draft or free agency or somewhere at some of these playmaker positions, because you talked about getting the ball in the hands of playmakers. I know that Brandon Cooks I thought it was so weird that whenever they're basically saying that the whole roster's up for grabs, all this stuff like that, you take a guy in Brandon Cooks that was born in 1990. He's drafted 2014. He came out, so he was born in like 93. That would make him coming up to about 29-ish, 30 years old. Multiple concussions. I feel like at any point in time, his career could be in trouble with another bad one of those. But they talk about how they want to build around him. I thought that was kind of interesting. Clearly, he's a great playmaker. It's probably the number one perimeter option for the Texans. But what did you think about the fact that he was a guy that the team basically said, like, look, we're taking all. I remember the reporting coming out, maybe from McLean or it might have been Aaron Wilson or somebody saying like they're taking all comers for trades, but one guy they're not interested in really trading away right now, and they see as sort of a building block, is Brandon Cooks. Was that reporting true based on what you've kind of seen around there? And what is your outlook on the whole situation with Cooks right now?
I can't speak to the reporting, but I can tell you this. I mean, it's stunning that guy's never been to a Pro Bowl. You brought up.
Is that true? Is that true?
You brought up the concussions. That happened in about 3 years ago. And then in his rookie season, that's 2 seasons since 2014 when he came into the league that he's not had 1,000 yards. I mean, the guy is a productive receiver, and he's also a good dude in the locker room. And I had somebody ask me, he's clearly a regime guy, and he's a guy that's good for that coaching staff. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell coaching staff wouldn't want a player like him. He's been great in New England. He was great in New Orleans. He was good for Los Angeles. He's been great, really, here. He's the only guy not named Andre Johnson or DeAndre Hopkins that has 1,000-yard receiving season for the Houston Texans. I mean, he's been outstanding, and he gets it. Like, he's a vet. He's a pro's pro. He's the guy that kind of leads the way in practice, in the weight room, and clearly on the field. That's somebody that you want around. That's somebody that you want to throw to. And I know Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor before him, were very, very comfortable getting him the ball. He's a really impressive dude. And, yeah, he's definitely part of the future here in Houston.
That's crazy because also if you consider it, so I know that, I don't know. You don't know. None of us, I guess, know what's going to happen with guys like Chris Conley, Chris Moore. These are kind of back of the roster types of guys on most NFL teams. Certainly Danny Amendola feels like his days in the NFL could be numbered just due to his age.
Don't
and
sleep
stuff
on
like
Danny Amendola, dude. That guy is kind of like a cockroach. I think we could have a nuclear war and he'll survive. He'll still catch some balls. He'll score touchdowns, return punts. He is tough as beef jerky, dude.
Okay, well, all right. Point well taken. I will not be counting out Danny Amendola. What should our expectations be, though, this year and year 2 for Nico Collins, the 3rd-round pick in 2021?
Fascinating player, man. He is really, really fascinating. I can't wait to see what he does. He was solid as a rookie, I thought. And, again, I don't know that offense really was able to showcase his talents and some of the other guys, like maybe Pep Hamilton's might. I'm really looking forward to, because we always hear about the big jump from year 1 to year 2 for all players in the NFL, but certainly for receivers. And I think he's definitely one of those guys that could be primed for a jump. He's bigger. Cooks has talked about what a great guy to have opposite him. Collins is. So I can't wait to see what's next for him. And, he's been working out and getting ready, and, he's going to catch passes with Mills, along with a lot of other guys this offseason. Mills talked about that. He wanted to, get involved when they're not here for the offseason conditioning work or the OTAs and so forth. So I can't wait to see what's next for Nico Collins, because you remember he's a guy they moved up for in the draft last year, and they spent a 3rd round pick on him, and they definitely have some high expectations for him.
Who are some of the other guys? I mean, I know that let's see, didn't they have
Brevin Jordan. Remember,
I was going to ask. I believe it or not, it's on my list here to ask you about Brevin Jordan. My radio co-host, the Trashman, said if you're having Drew Dougherty on, you got to ask about Brevin. So we can just talk about him now. Like,
smart guy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Brevin's good, man. He's a fun. I mean, if you think about they only drafted 5 rookies last year. Every single one of them played a lot. You had Cooks. You had Mills, you had Collins. You also had Roy Lopez, a defensive lineman, started 15 games for this team. You had Garrett Wallow, who came in, and for December, he was basically one of your starters at linebacker. But before that, he was one of your key special teamers and really made an impact there. So these guys have all come in and done really, really good things. And at about mid-season, Brevin Jordan, the tight end out of Miami, got involved and started catching touchdowns and moving the chains. And it's another guy that I think Pep Hamilton, new passing game coordinator, Ben McDaniels, who coached Collins at Michigan, I think they're going to figure out ways and get creative and get these guys the ball, because they can make plays once they get it in their hands. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for that little 3-man skill position trio of quarterback Davis Mills, Brevin Jordan, the tight end, and Nico Collins at wideout.
Oh, I loved it. I love that. Okay, well that's fantastic for our fantasy and our dynasty folks. 2 of the main guys that we really wanted to kind of probe around were Nico and Brevin Jordan. But just also, we got a lot of people here who like doing mock drafts, who like filling this stuff out.
Me too.
What do you think? Just like, what to you are the Texans draft needs?
Yes. Because that's kind of what we asked Lovie Smith when we interviewed him a couple weeks back after the hiring. Like, hey, how involved in the draft process are you? And he said, shoot, before I got hired, in between the end of the season and now, I've been looking at tape on these guys. And he says he loves the technology because he was able to watch every single Senior Bowl practice rep for all these guys, and he's really involved. But when we asked him, where might the Texans look to go? Because you got that 3rd overall pick, as well as 8 others, and 4 of them are going to be in the top 80. He said, if you told me we need to take a defensive lineman, I'd say okay. You told me we need a receiver, all right. A corner, all right. Basically, everything is wide open. And that's kind of why earlier in the conversation you asked about quarterbacks. If they think that's the best player available, then that's maybe the route they'll go. Depending on where they're choosing in the draft. I'm not saying at 3 overall, but I think they're just going to go with the BPA. And I know it's not an exciting thing to hear, but I also think you got to remember, based on what Nick Caserio has said, they'll listen to offers about that 3rd overall pick. He said, whether or not we actually use the 3rd pick in that spot is a separate discussion. I mean, that's quotes. It's a whole separate discussion. So he clearly floated that out there, that the Texans are willing to move, because there are lots of areas for improvement on this team, and you want to get more chances at guys, I suppose. So if they can add a few more high-round draft picks by moving back, then I think that's something that you might see.
Okay, so again, he's Drew Dougherty. You can find him on Twitter at Dougherty Drew, host of Texans TV and all-around content creator there over at houstontexans.com. We ask RosterWatch Nation, please mobilize, unite. Go give Drew a follow over there. All right, Drew, I will get you out of this. I'll get you out of here on this one. And you can't take the easy thing and say trade down. So right. let's just say that Mr. McNair comes in tomorrow, taps you on the head, says you are now the GM of the Houston Texans.
God help the Texans.
You get to handle the draft this year. You can't trade down. You can't find a trade partner. What are you gonna do at 3? What are you honing in on? Doesn't need to be a specific player if you don't have one, but maybe a specific angle that you would take or a specific position that you would attack.
I mean, I don't know about you, but this is one of the weirdest drafts I can ever remember, because there is no clear number 1. There's not a clear guy that, okay, he's going first. And then, So
Right.
there's lots of variables. I just want somebody that's going to come in and be a difference maker. And I know there's lots of folks that say, oh, this draft doesn't have those guys. I don't buy into that. I think there's probably 6 or 7 guys there at the front that they're going to come in and they're going to be really, really good for you for a long time. And they'll do so pretty soon as well. So I think there's lots of great choices there at the top. Man, I do a mock draft tracker for the website where you kind of compile and see who's Rob Rang taken, who's Todd McShay, Melkai. So you kind of assimilate all those guys. And the latest one, most drafted to the Texans, has been Kayvon Thibodeau. Intriguing guy. But Aiden Hutchinson has fallen, so to speak, in a lot of mock drafts. That'd be really cool. And then, man, I love what Kyle Hamilton's done at safety. Now, I'm not privy to any of the discussions, what our guys like Caserio and them are doing upstairs. But, I mean, because as far as Hamilton and Hutchinson, those are the two that kind of ping, ping, ping get me excited. Now, whether it happens or not, we'll see. But I really like the way those guys play the game.
Hutchinson, man, you could get your next JJ Watt just like that.
But I still see him slipping past the Detroit Lions.
Yeah,
maybe stranger things have happened, but I just can't see him falling down to 3. You know?
Yeah, no, yeah.
But if he were, oof.